Hello, America. I'm Eric Erickson. These are the four things you need to know this afternoon. From tech boardrooms to global trade tensions, domestic lawsuits to aluminum tariffs, these are the issues you got to be watching as you head home. Just a heads up, you can now subscribe to this in your favorite podcasting app. Just search for Four Things to Know This Afternoon. First up, we've got to go to the White House where the president and corporate leaders are meeting. Today, President Trump has assembled corporate leaders from companies like Dell to Goldman Sachs to Robinhood to tout his idea. He's calling them freedom accounts, or rather Trump accounts now. In a long-term effort to fix Social Security, President Trump wants corporate backing for this new idea. The idea would be to give each newly born American citizen a $1,000 tax-free account that's invested in an index fund. The money would grow over time as the stock grew and help fund the child's retirement or possibly college education. President Trump wants the corporate titans to go first and both support the program and adopt the program. So if corporations embrace the program and make the investment for children of their employees, it would minimize costs to the federal government to do the same for those kids whose parents don't work for major companies. Together, the private and public sector could transform Social Security, put it on a more stable footing. Now, conservatives have long sought a plan like this, going back to before the Bush era, as a way to create room for entitlement reform. Essentially, you lengthen the runway to fix Social Security by having a private-public partnership for newly born kids. It's a solid path, and it's a way for corporations that have criticized Trump to show him some support for a bold new initiative. Up next, tariffs, steel, the rising cost of living. Two stories today spotlight this. The aluminum premiums in the United States have hit record levels, and canned good prices are climbing sharply due to the steel tariffs. Reuters reports that aluminum premiums, a key input cost for manufacturing, have surged since new tariffs took effect and now at 50%. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal details how food manufacturers are now passing higher steel packaging costs onto consumers, raising the price of everything from beans to soup to cans of Coke. Conservatives need to be clear-eyed about this. Tariffs may serve strategic purposes, protecting supply chains, punishing bad actors, rebuilding American industry, but they're not cost-free. They are, as I keep saying, a tax on consumers. And when tariffs are applied too broadly or too abruptly or even too much, they disrupt markets and punish the very Americans they claim to be helping. There's a smarter way to do this. Targeted tariffs combined with the regulatory reform and domestic production incentives can build resilience without crushing the middle class. But slapping tariffs on raw materials across the board isn't an economic strategy. It's just a political signal, and the signals don't pay for groceries. We've got to be vigilant. If Trump wants to protect American industry, great, but let's do it in a way that doesn't spark price hikes that hammer working families. Conservatives need to remain the party of market accountability and taxpayer stewardship. Up next, we've got to move on because, well, we've got China to contend with. But before we even get to China, we got to go to California, which are the American communists. In a legally aggressive move, California has decided to file suit against the Trump administration for reasserting federal control over National Guard units within the state. Now, here's what this is really about: sovereignty and federalism. For years, blue states like California have attempted to operate as parallel governments, nullifying federal immigration law, refusing to cooperate with ICE, weaponizing their National Guard units for social activism, and passing laws prohibiting local police from helping federal authorities. Trump is saying enough is enough. The Constitution gives the federal government clear authority over the National Guard during times of national emergency or defense deployment, or when other federal authorities must be supplemented. If states want to defy federal law, they shouldn't expect federal funding. If they want to use their Guard as a progressive non-governmental organization in uniform, they shouldn't expect to keep it under their command. The lawsuit, like many others, it's a political stunt dressed up as civil rights litigation, and frankly, the law is on President Trump's side, even if a local federal activist judge says otherwise. The federal government's constitutional powers got to be defended here. If California doesn't like Trump's policies, they can challenge them through legal means, but they don't get to run over their own foreign policy with state uniforms. And this is a key point you have to understand. California law, called the California Virtues Act, prohibits local law enforcement from collaborating with the federal government on immigration enforcement that's at a civil level. As a result, for example, federal authorities have to preserve and protect the ICE facility. Local police aren't allowed to help until violence happens. That's why the president has had to summon the National Guard, because local police in California are specifically, by law in California, prohibited from helping. Lastly, as I mentioned in China, the New York Times is reporting the U.S. and Chinese trade representatives have decided to meet later this month, making the first high-level engagement since these rounds of tariffs and escalations. The meeting comes at a critical moment. Supply chains are beginning to shift. Manufacturing is beginning to decouple. The global economic order is beginning to realign. And Donald Trump has made it clear China's not a partner, it's a rival. Any future economic agreement needs to reflect that reality. Here's the conservative perspective on this. Engagement should be conditional. The Chinese Communist Party lied about COVID. It has stolen intellectual property. It's militarized the South China Sea, and it's supported Russia's war in Ukraine. We don't owe them an open market. We owe them consequences. Trump is right to leverage American strength, but here's the nuanced part of this. Strength has got to be strategic, not reactionary. We should negotiate from a position of strength and bring clarity. Our goals should be economic independence, not perpetual confrontation. China needs access to our markets more than we need theirs. Let's use this leverage to rebuild American manufacturing related to our national security, but not broadly across the board with everything. Some things don't need to be made here. Let's not fall into the trap of trade wars for their own sake as well. We've got to be smart about this. Now, in closing, here's what we've got. The big takeaways this afternoon. Trump is calling for corporate CEOs to help with his economic plan, including something he's calling Trump Accounts. Tariffs are raising aluminum and food prices. If we're going to use them, we need to be precise, not punitive to the American consumer. California is suing Trump to keep control of its National Guard, but federal authorities have got to uphold national laws that allow Trump to mobilize the National Guard. And U.S.-China trade talks are resuming. Let's engage, but on terms that reflect our strength, not global nostalgia. This is 4 Things to Know this afternoon. I'm Eric Erickson. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and get the podcast. Stay grounded, stay informed, and as always, keep the faith.